I think the deeper that you get through the rounds, the more emotionally invested and attached you become to that role. And I could be the most perfect person in the room, but if someone is maybe fits better in terms of culture fit or personality, like that's something that I can't control. So really drawing the line between, hey, I can control the conversation and being present in the moment, but I can't control all the other factors.
Welcome back to Answer the Call podcast, where we help Christians faithfully discern their calling and land a job that's aligned with it. We do that through a variety of ways, including free resources like this podcast, but also through one-on-one coaching and group coaching. And today, I have a friend of mine here on the podcast who also is a client success story, and I'll do a little intro for him. So after facing a pretty brutal layoff this past fall, Larry signed up for our Job Accelerator program, which is where we actually help people who are already clear on the direction that they're going for in their job search. And we help them starting with their resume and LinkedIn, and then provide weekly job search support with lots of calls involved in that to help them land that next position and feel good about the next position that they land. So Larry definitely faced the usual ups and downs of the job search, I'll say it that way, but he really had a lot of a steady stream of interviews that ultimately materialized into not one, but two offers. So I want to break down that process today for all of those listening. Let's talk about how this all worked out. Welcome to the podcast, Larry. I'm so excited to have you here.
I am glad to be here, glad to be chatting about my experience, and let's dive into it.
Great. So sorry we have to bring it back here, but you were working as a product manager and you got an unexpected layoff this past fall. And I described it as brutal because what was it? Like you found out on a Friday and you were done on Monday? What was that?
Yeah, it was like they sent out hey, let's develop your career. Let's move forward with it. And then 2 days later, they're like, hey, we're actually going to let you go instead. And that happened on a Thursday. And then, and then they're like, your last day's on Friday. Feel free to turn in your laptop. And then on Monday, and I was like, that's it. And it was almost like, this is crazy that it's happening to me, that I didn't even have time to process it. So definitely a turn of events for sure.
Yeah. So how did that unexpected layoff and quick layoff affect how you were initially planning to approach your job search or just in general?
Yeah, at first I was like, oh man, like where do I go from here? I definitely was hesitant on what to do next. And getting plugged in the community group, my girlfriend actually, which she's great, she reached out and she was like, hey, Audrey actually does career coaching and maybe you should go check it out. And at that point, I was like, for sure, I'm definitely interested. So got plugged in with you in the community group and then talked to Kelsey and was like, this is great. It has everything that I want to be a part of. Kelsey's amazing and she's great at just encouragement and tips on how to get better and what to do next in the career pivot and the career search job opportunity side of things. And it was just a good community full of Christian folks that I can lean on during the time. And so I was like, yeah, I should definitely give it a shot, and signed up. And it was one of the best decisions I've made.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, we are big Gabby fans over here, and we're big Kelsey fans too. So as we do in our Job Accelerator program, you sign up, immediately we get you started with our resume writer, Tim, and he got to optimizing your resume and LinkedIn right away, and that positioned you really well. How did you find, and you found a lot of quick momentum with that. So what else were some action steps you took early on to find that quick momentum? Because you landed an interview pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think it was wild because we did the outreach thing together. And so we were going through that example where you're like, here's how you do outreach. Like, go ahead and apply on LinkedIn. And it was the first company on the list. And I was like, okay. It's like, go ahead and find the head of product or whoever is hiring for that role. And I was like, okay. It's like, here's a message template you should send out, make it personalized. I'm like, sure. So that very first example, we were able to land it, and he connected right away, was able to get something set up and scheduled. And so in addition to Tim's awesome way of putting together the resume, which we can also talk about that too, just doing the outreach and having that all line up was pretty crazy to say the least. And just being persistent in that outreach and hitting up those jobs on LinkedIn and finding those hiring managers really helped as well.
Yes, yeah. So when Larry's talking about outreach, what he's talking about is finding a hiring manager and sending them that pitch message, which we talk about all the time. That is absolutely the method that y'all need to be using when you are applying to these jobs. Just sending in blank applications are not going to get you the results that you want. And you heard it here. It was the first message he sent out, the first job that he applied to. And he got an interview right away. So that's awesome momentum. I really would say momentum was kind of a slogan of your whole experience. You always had good momentum. So we'll talk how, that eventually materialized into a job. But I do want to touch on your resume. What were some of the biggest changes that you noticed between maybe how your resume looked before and how Tim optimized it?
Yeah, I think at the start, my resume was one page, education on top, and like a whole bunch of here's what I did and bullet points and things like that. Tim really transformed it to the way it was like, here's the key takeaways of who I was and my role and what I did in the past. And then Tim also shelved my education all the way to the bottom, which was great too, because what the recruiter wants to see, I think, was like, hey, what are the key takeaways of this person and like 5 bullet points. And then within each section, Tim did a really great job of just writing a quick level summary of what I did in that particular role and then tied it to certain values that they were looking for. So like one role of mine was like cross collaboration. And then he also described how I was being cross collaborative across teams. Or like analytics, and then an example of how I was able to drive analytics. And then also just keywords too that matched my resume and what I did. And that actually ended up being 2 pages. So I think the whole myth about how your resume should just be 1 page and like very condensed, I think that is sort of a myth almost, because mine went into 2 pages, but it had everything that it needed for a recruiter to quickly look at it and be like, yeah, like this person has the skills and experiences we're looking for based off of the role. Like I'm definitely going to reach out and get him on an interview. And I think that's all I sort of needed just to have that opportunity, that door open for me to jump in and start interviewing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if your resume has relevant information, it's okay for it to go on to a second page for sure. And you have a lot of great experience. So I'm glad that we were able to bust that myth wide open. But I do want people listening to know that sometimes a one-page resume works. Just come talk to us. We'll help you figure out if it's the right move for you. But yeah, you had a great amount of experience, and it called out those um, key things that we wanted recruiters and hiring managers to see. So resume looked good, your LinkedIn looked good, you landed this interview pretty quickly, which means we got to get into interview prep. How did practicing and refining your interviews help, especially getting that so quickly into your process?
Yeah, I remember Audrey, like our first one on one, and the first question you asked was, tell me about yourself. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. Like in my
Mm-hmm.
mind, I was just rambling on, tell me about yourself. And then you were asking specific questions. I was like, oh no, like I'm trying to think of what to say while saying it. And it ended up being this like very verbose thing that I was saying. And so after our prep and then subsequent preps together, really sat down and just like did a lot of mock interviews with myself where I mean, AI honestly asked me questions and then I would actually record myself answering those questions, just like simply like ChatGPT. And so like after I recorded myself, it was like, here's all the tips you could get. And I was like, hey, like, please make this more concise. And it would just give me examples of how to be more concise. And then I just practiced that over and over again. I'm like, thanks for your help. Like, let's do it again. And so I kept asking it the same questions for me to really solidify the way I was responding. And that seemed to help a lot. And so the next time we hopped on a call together, it was like night and day difference. So
Yeah,
definitely that helped out a lot.
absolutely. Absolutely. I saw that improvement in you so quickly. And you also, we talked more about doing consultative style interviewing versus that transactional interview, which is, consulting on the role versus just trying to sound perfect, right? And
Mhm.
what did you learn about that, or how did that change how you were even approaching this prep and especially approaching the conversations?
Yeah, I think a lot of the interviews, it's like you want to sound perfect, but instead it's not about sounding perfect, but it's about establishing a connection with who you're talking to. And I think like at the start, I was like sounding very robotic, like making sure I run through the star principle and all of that. But then at the end of the day, it was, hey, how do I make sure that I can land a strong takeaway from what I'm saying? How do I lead strong first and end strong? And then maybe sneak in an example there as well. Um, and so a lot of it shifted from here's a question, here's how I would answer it perfectly, to here's a bunch of stories that I can tap into at any time. And the questions sort of just serve as it's just framed in different ways. But as long as I have something that talks about conflict, for example, uh, I've got something in my back pocket to use as like a tool. Or, hey, how I was able to lead a team, as long as I have that leadership story, however you frame it, I'm able to like twist the story in a good way, of course, and like showcase things that they are looking for versus others that really help me out. And I think a lot of it too came down to they have a problem, or whoever the company is that I'm interviewing with, they're looking for someone to fill that role and sort of solve their problem. And so I think a lot of the times it's like, hey, why do you want to work here? I think just getting really immersed in what is the problem that they're trying to solve, what is the role that they're looking to solve the problem, and like how do you guide them to the promised land or the ideal state. And as long as like you're able to articulate that from the get-go, especially on the why, and even if they don't even ask, hey, why do you want to work here, just being able to conclude the conversation with, hey, here's sort of what I think you're looking for. Here's how I fill the gap, and here's how I'm different than maybe other folks you're interviewing with, or things like that, goes a long way to show like you understand their space and you understand how your skills align with what they're trying to get at.
Larry, that was such an expert answer. Kelsey and I just recorded a whole podcast episode that is probably out before this podcast episode about why you're getting rejected from the hiring manager interview. Was some version of that is the title of that episode. And we talked about everything that you just discussed. So actually, we didn't need to have a whole podcast episode. We just needed to have you on as guest to talk through it, because you hit the nail on the head with that. And I definitely saw that shift in you as you were getting more comfortable and you did a lot of the prep and you got really good at interviewing, but that doesn't mean, oh, by no stretch of the imagine, does that mean it was easy, right? You put in a lot of work, a lot of reps to build up those skills. So, how did you, when you're putting in so much effort and doing so many different interviews, how did you not let like the performance from one interview affect the next one? How'd you prevent maybe one tough interview from impacting the next one that you were going to?
Yeah, I think for me, it was more of reframing it as, hey, it's just one opportunity. And I think the deeper that you get through the rounds, the more emotionally invested and attached you become to that role. It's like, wow, they're spending so much time on me. I am spending so much time on them. But at the same time, it's like putting it into perspective that this is just one opportunity. And if something doesn't shake out, and I could be the most perfect person in the room, but if someone is maybe fits better in terms of culture fit or personality, like that's something that I can't control. So really drawing the line between, hey, I can control the conversation and being present in the moment, but I can't control all the other factors, and letting that impact my emotional capability is sort of like a waste of energy and time. And that energy and time could be used to redirect towards other opportunities that I would be just as content in being with. And so I think a lot of the times it's like I think the worst part of it all was, hey, the interview I thought went great, but the waiting period is so long. And then you're just like waiting and you're getting frantic and you're like, oh man. And you start recounting everything you did wrong and being a really harsh critic on yourself. I think for me, it was the interview went great. There are things outside of my control. maybe there are 3 takeaways that I could have done better. And I also just like took note of the questions they asked and I shoved it into a question box of like, they asked me all these questions that caught me off guard. I would shove them into like a test bank, I would call it. And so I would be like, next time I would pull out that question and just answer it again. So I would feel good and then just move on to the next one. And I know that's tough and it's difficult because we're emotional and we like to get attached to things. I know I'm an emotional person, but just realizing that it's just one opportunity out of many, and all I needed was just one opportunity. And if it's not that one, that's okay. Opportunities will come, and just fully trusting that they will come, um, and that God will provide.
Mm-hmm. Amen. You're preaching some healthy detachment right now. Detachment from results, or I guess anything that's out of your control. And it's such a key thing that we try to instill in people and coach people on, because we have all been there when, you find the one job posting and you start making that story in your head of, oh, this is the job that's going to work out and it's going to be perfect for all of these reasons. And I totally get why God is putting this in my life at this exact moment. And like, you haven't even applied yet, right? And
Yeah.
it's that over investment emotionally too early on. I know you've heard Kelsey say this, but it's like showing up to a first date in your wedding dress. Not a good idea. It's a recipe for disaster when it comes to emotional management. And that's so everything you said, I think is so wise about being more emotionally detached and avoiding getting too attached before there's really an offer in front of you. So part of that is managing multiple jobs at one time, or multiple job interviews and lots of applications at one time, having multiple irons in the fire, as you have said it. How did you manage having all these things going at once without burning out?
Yeah, I purposely spread them apart. So I know, Audrey, one of the best tips you gave me was, hey, like email them, let them spend some time getting back to you, and use that time as like a period of rest time, as you're then talking to other opportunities that are down the line, and making sure that I'm spreading apart. So I would never interview twice in one day. I would be like, hey, I do one on Tuesday, and then I'd give myself 2 days, and on Thursday I would do another one, and just spreading it in a way that helped me get a 1 day break, or over the weekend just to have a little bit of break. I think that really helped a lot. Um, and just being able to say after that interview's done, I am going to, spend 1 day or one weekend not doing anything, not thinking about interviews at all, not thinking about prep, not thinking about job opportunities, and just using that to invest in other things, that are outside of the job search. I think for me, one of the things that helped me the most was building strong habits too, um, outside of the job search. Two that I really loved doing was, one, every morning I would do like an hour devotional, like no excuses, no ands and buts and ifs about it. And so that was one thing that I chose to do, because it was, I woke up first thing in the morning, I'm giving my first fruits to the Lord. 1 hour straight, like I would just read scripture. And at first I didn't know where to start, but I was like, hey, like let's just dive into a book. So I started in Acts, and then I read all of by the end of this job search, read all of Paul's letters, and then jumped
Wow.
into the Old Testament. And so like the first hour is like non-negotiable, like just focused on spending time with God. And it was never like a, God, like please like give me this job, like I really need, in the search it was like, God, what are you trying to tell me today? And honestly, like it's just spending time with you and in the Word. That was one thing that really helped through the bad days too, because I knew that whatever happened throughout the rest of the day, I had the Word to rely on, and I had space to spend with the Lord, which is
Mhm.
incredible. The second one I would say is like running. I picked it up. I used to be a cross country runner. And I, during the interview prep, I would be like, hey, interviews were always in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I would just go out and run. And so if I tanked an interview or I felt like I did really bad, I'm like, hey, afternoon, you're angry about it, you're sad about it. All right, let's hit the pavement and just spend like 30 minutes like crushing the run. And like during that time, I'd be angry. Like I'd be angry, mad, frustrated, but I had like a way to release that through running. And so I would just go at it like every afternoon. So I had no interviews in the afternoon. All of them were in the morning. And then whenever I was stressed, angry, mad, I took it to the Lord during the mornings. And then in the afternoons, I picked up running as a habit. And after the run, it was like, yeah, like if anything, like you can take anything away from me. Like you can take the job away from me, which I didn't have a job at that point. Like you can reject me all you want, but I know two things are true and central to who I am, and that's something that you can't take away from me, or no one can. And so I think that helped me get through a lot of the bad days and the stress that I had.
That is so important to share, Larry. I'm so glad that you did, because when you are job searching in a time of unemployment, it's very tempting and very easy to make your job search your entire life. And there are elements of advice there. It's good to talk about your job search a lot. It's good to share it with a lot of people. You never know where connections will come from, but it's really, really important to have those healthy boundaries around, okay, I'm not job searching for 8 hours a day or 6 hours a day, maybe not even 4 hours a day, bringing it down to 1, 2, 3, and that'll look different at different times in your job search. And maintaining a life outside of your job search, even if you are unemployed, it's a really, really, I want to say a special time, but it's so sensitive because unemployment is so hard and people are in such differing situations. But it can be a really special time for you to rely on the Lord in a whole new way when you don't have this job that you're having to report to for at least 8 hours a day. So I'm very impressed with how you intentionally use that time, and I see how it seriously affected your job search in such a great way. Because, like I've been saying this whole interview, I your momentum was so interesting to watch because you always had momentum and you were always going, and you, like I said, resisted burnout, which was very interesting because I see people have their high highs and their low lows, and then they kind of just filter out for a little bit and they come back and have their high highs and low lows. But you had the high highs, the low lows, but you remained steady through it all. And I really hope people can take some of what you said and implement it into their own lives right now as they're going through a job search, because I mean, you're the evidence here that that's what you need to do. And I've seen it work for other people too. So thank you for sharing that. Speaking of, we'll talk about the low lows first. How about that? And then we'll get to the high highs.
For
But
sure.
you faced a brutal rejection, Larry. Was it 6 rounds of interviews?
Yeah, it was 6 rounds and a presentation and like a technical case too. So by that point, I was
On
like
site.
super invested. They invited me on campus. They paid for my meal. They paid for coffee, like all of that stuff. And I was like coming up at the end of the year, and so that was like, man, this is great. And so after the last interview, went out like super confident. I was like, yes, I'm gonna get it. This is gonna be mine. Um, and then 1 week goes by, no response. And then 2 week goes by, and then there's no response. And then I was actually on a vacation, and they sent an email saying like, "Hey, like, thanks so much for waiting. Like, turns out that after all of that process, like, you just didn't have the experience we were looking for." And I was like, "Oh man!" And so like that was a very low point for me in terms of the job search, because I went in there thinking, yeah, I'm convicted. Like this is definitely going to be it. And then walking out was like, wow, I guess I didn't do as well as I thought I did. What went wrong? And so started spiraling a lot in terms of my ability and my ability to interview and my ability to do the job well and all that.
Yeah. Yeah. The rejections hurt, and some of them hurt a lot more than the others, because I was right there with you thinking, this is it. Like, how can they not? And like I've seen this time and time again, how I still fall into it where I get wrapped up in the, oh, this is totally going to work out. Um, and it's crushing when something like that doesn't, especially when you put so much effort into it. And what I'm curious to hear from you is how did you bounce back from that rejection? What was important to you to be able to get up the next day and start again?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, taking the time to grieve. I think oftentimes we gloss over it and we say it's fine, even though it's not fine. And that ends up just festering inside of you to the point where it impacts the way you move forward. And so I took the time to like 1 or 2 days to really be sad about it, and to be angry and to let my emotions out and to say, God, this is not fair, or to say everything that was not rational but emotional and what I needed to get out. I think it's super healthy to do that, especially when it comes to a rejection. And then framing it more of like a decision. And so for me, it was, hey, I can continue to be really sad about all of this, but what is done is done, and what is decided is decided. And so, like, how do I move forward from this? And so the next thing was, okay, thought the interview went really well. Turns out it didn't seem like they thought I had enough experience. Like what went kind of wrong in that conversation? Or maybe what did I feel like I did well that maybe wasn't quite well? And so really picked apart how I did on the interviews and was like, oh, there was this one time when they kept asking me at the end of the day about my technical abilities that turns out I wasn't really great at answering. And so, hey, let's focus on that a little bit and break down a better way to communicate my technical abilities. Or hey, they asked me a question and I got thrown off by it. I started rambling and I appeared nervous. What was that question? Oh, it was this one. Took that question. It's like, how do I convey better stories behind it? And so really picking apart and maybe doing like an analysis on how well I did in the interview, sort of like an athlete looking at a film, and took that as this is how I should be doing better moving forward, and apply that mentality to the next opportunities that I would get down the line. And just not being afraid to be like, this is my one and only shot and I'm done and there's no other opportunities. Trusting that other opportunities are out there. And when they did come, here's what I would do differently. So that's sort of how I framed it. And I also celebrated the wins too. Like there was one part where I looked back and I was like, there's no way. I don't think I could ever do that again. It was so out of the blue left field. I was like, man, I can actually think on my feet. I'm capable of thinking on my feet wherever the interview goes, how sideways it goes. And I'm not memorizing from a script. I'm just who I am. Goes a long way too. So
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. I mean, on everything that you said, but specifically, I want to call out the letting your emotions out so that you can then look back rationally on how everything happened and went down. When we ignore the emotions, we try to suppress them, they're going to come up in some way, and it's just going to prolong the pain from facing a rejection like this versus just acknowledging them, feeling them, grieving the opportunity. I remember you coming onto a call once and saying, yeah, I'm grieving this opportunity. And it was it's such an authentic way to put it. And that gives you then the space to look back more rationally, as you were saying, and just be able to look at it like data rather than some mixed bag of emotions and information. So I think that's very wise. And funny thing enough, that company ended up being your second offer that you received. But let's start with the first offer. So you're interviewing throughout this past month. One of my favorite parts of this story is that you come on to one of our group coaching calls and you say, I just bombed that interview. And then tell us what happened. What happened after that, Larry?
Yeah, it was wild. We were on that call and then the recruiter said, "Hey, I just touched base with the hiring manager and the chief of product. Like they do you have time right now to hop on a call to talk about next steps?" And I was like, "Hey, y'all, like I gotta go. I don't know what's happening." And so I hopped off the call and then hopped on a call with her and she was like, "Congratulations, like we're gonna offer you this role." And it was like 2 to 3 hours right after my last interview that I felt like I did terribly on. So
Mm-hmm.
such a turn of events. And why I felt terrible about it was because that week was a lot of different conversations coming down to the haywire of the final step. And that conversation was on a Friday. And so I sat down with, it was with the hiring manager and the chief of product. And they were just asking me really simple behavioral questions. But I was so tired to the point where I was just like shaking in my words, like being nervous. Like I think it was just nervous fatigue. And then it turned out to be a surprise and something completely unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Maybe there's something there about you just let your guard down and that actually came off super confident. I don't know. I wasn't in the call. But I see that with people sometimes where they're, we love to say, quoting a current client right now, James, we say, less think, more click. And just stop overthinking, right? A lot easier said than done. But maybe it was an element of that in the interview where you just let down your guard. You're like, I'm sick of this at this point. I've answered these kinds of questions for a couple months now. I'm just gonna talk. And I also want to add in there that this wasn't the number one opportunity that you were at the time. Just looking at all these different ones, it turns out to be a great opportunity. But maybe that helped too, where you're like, yeah, this is good. I'm glad I have this going. This will be a great place to work, a great job, but I'm not trying to be someone right now.
Yeah, it was
Just
weird
live
because
my
that
life.
job was a higher title than what I currently or what I used to have, with a lot more higher pay and responsibility. And so I was like, yeah, like even if I don't get it, it's okay. It's a higher role. Like I'm just in it to have a conversation and see where it goes. Gonna still bring my very best, but no pressures. And so that turned out to be a huge surprise too, because I wasn't pressuring myself and there wasn't a subconscious. It was like they wanted to do a case study. I was like, sure, why not? Like gone in, they asked me questions and I honestly just felt really confident afterwards after those conversations. So except for the last one, but that was because I had nervous fatigue by the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah. You were putting a lot of hours at that point. So they give you the offer on a Friday. That's great Friday energy. And then the next week after that, you get another offer. So all of this work and that second offer, like I mentioned, was from that initial rejection company. So definitely this is your PSA to continue nurturing those leads of like opportunities, companies that say, this job isn't right for you at this time, but we have this other job that we want you to apply to. Follow up on those leads. I think a lot of people see that as a blow off, but what harm is it to continue following up on that? And in Larry's case, it actually materialized into something. So, um,
For sure. It's like everyone already knows who you are and they're
mhm,
rooting for you and they clearly saw a potential in you and it was just because the role that you were going for wasn't a great fit and that's
mhm.
okay, but they still really liked who you were and what you brought to the table. And so I would say like, yeah, if they are giving you another opportunity to apply for another role that they think you'd be a better fit in, I just go for it. um, Meanwhile, of
Absolutely.
being like, hey, like I've already gone through the process with y'all. Is there any way that we could uh, maybe shortcut it or spend like
Accelerate it.
accelerate it more? I think for that one too, like they were gonna have me do another round with someone I'd already talked to, and I just was like, hey, actually, I already talked to them, and we had a great conversation. And I said, I'm happy to talk to him again, but would totally like want to be respectful of your time as you all are probably interviewing other candidates as well. And I don't know why that phrase there of interviewing other candidates as well ended up sort of being in my benefit because it showed them that I was aware that they're also considering other folks. I don't know. It's weird because in that last interview that I had, the one that I got an offer, I kept mentioning like, "Hey, I want to be respectful of your time," because we kept going over. You have a bunch of because they kept bringing up like we have a lot of candidates to go through. Like they were quoting numbers of like up to like 600, and I was like, "Whoa, like that's crazy. I hope you can get through all of them." Like, best of luck to you finding the right fit. And I think that just like is sort of maybe a leverage position that you could use in which they see you as, oh, he understands that we're going through a lot. He's showing empathy, or he or she's showing empathy in it. And so I think that goes a long way too in terms of just leveraging like you're not just one person in the machine. It's like you also have leverage power.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Larry. So well said because you're demonstrating professionalism by saying, hey, I want to respect your time. I want to respect your time. You're demonstrating a lot of confidence by saying, I know you've got other people. Like, I want you to get the best person. You're demonstrating understanding for the hiring process, which maybe you don't need to know that in your role, but it's very good emotional intelligence that we all just want emotionally intelligent people in the roles around us.
Yeah.
And so it demonstrates a lot of emotional intelligence, demonstrates confidence, and it demonstrates, along with that confidence, just a lack of fear, like in a lack of desperation. You're not coming at this from a place of, I need this job. I hope I'm the only one. Do you have anybody else that you're interviewing? How good are that? It's, hey, yeah, I know y'all got other people. Like, do what you got to do. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, no sweat. And that kind of confidence is very compelling, very compelling. I want to say subconsciously, but also probably consciously in these hiring for these people who are hiring, especially if they are well seasoned in hiring, they know to look for that kind of confidence because that's the kind of person that they want on their team. So, going through this whole process, what was helpful about having community? You were an active participant on the group calls, which I love to see, and the prayer calls. What was helpful about being with other people who were going through similar things?
Yeah, I think just being with the community is so helpful too because it framed to me that I wasn't alone in what I was facing and that together as like a body, in a unified body of Christ, like we're able to give each other advice, and lean on each other when things get tough and to celebrate the wins, but also to grieve together. I think it's so important to it helps put things into perspective, um, when you're with other folks to get tips and advice, but to also pray together. That is when where we as Christians are the strongest, I believe, is when we are together and unified in the pursuit of landing an opportunity. And so I think that has been monumental. The prayer calls specifically, like y'all do such a great job with prayer calls, and there's something about your prayers. Every time y'all have prayed, something has become true. For
Oh, that's
example,
great.
when you were praying about, I need more momentum, I got momentum, a lot of it, a lot more than I could handle. Um, and then when Kelsey prayed about giving a job offer, I got a job offer. I'm not saying that like I'm not saying anything else about that, but in terms of transactional, but the prayers definitely do work. Um,
Yeah.
and seeing others' tips and advice on what they're doing and things to consider really help too.
Oh, amazing. Yes, the prayer calls are so fun for that reason. I mean, they're great to come together in community, and they're fun because we get to see the answered prayers. And I should be writing it down. because it's so special where when people message me like, hey, you know that thing that you prayed about like 2 hours ago, it actually came to fruition, kind of crazy. But the Lord hears our prayers, and he hears the prayers that sit in the silence of our hearts, but he also hears the prayers that are said loudly and boldly in a group, in community. And there is such beauty and power in that, that the fact we get to do that twice a week with y'all is so, so special. So I'm glad that you were an active participant and felt answered prayers and felt seen and heard by the Lord as well. And that's the best of it all. And
One more thing to
um,
add here, actually,
mhm.
is the best thing I would say is when Kelsey or you would go off track. I think that's great because it helps take off a lot of the pressure and angst that we're feeling. I think one, it puts into perspective again that we're all looking for opportunities and it's not an end all be all. It's like we are able to laugh together on things and that are not relevant to the job. And I think just going off track too has been really fun. And just like allows us to subconsciously zoom out of this whole job hunt and job search and to relate to each other as humans and as people, um, which I think is so important and goes a long way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And yeah, what Larry's referencing is typically at the end of our group coaching calls that we have on Tuesdays and Fridays, we'll have, if we have some extra time, we call it our off-roading time. And no one by any means has to stay on for this, but I have noticed that a lot of people do, because they're interested to see what's going to come out of my mouth or Kelsey's mouth. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's a chance to actually come together in community, because job searching, it is so serious. Like, our jobs are how we make money for ourselves, for our families. It is a very serious topic, which leads to a lot of heaviness too. So to pair that with the fun energy and bubbly energy and some levity in there, it's really important. And that's what's so important about doing this in community, and not just being your own like isolated chamber doing going through this process. It is so hard. It really is so hard when you're doing it on your own. There are hard elements when you're doing it in community, but doing it in community really brings out a much more positive side as well. It's hard if you're only on LinkedIn, seeing all the negativity on LinkedIn. Come on over to the group coaching calls. Come schedule a call with us and we'll talk about getting you signed up, because there is so much joy and light and positivity to bring into this as well. I feel like we could go on about that forever and ever, but I do want to ask you a final question here, Larry. What would you say for someone who's listening who might be in a similar position that you were a few months ago, having been laid off out of nowhere? What encouragement would you give to them?
Yeah, I would say just keep moving forward, no matter how big or how small. When you're feeling stuck, just always know there is a way and God will make a way through it. And so I think it's important to just not lose steam and momentum, to give yourself grace when it comes to you feel like you're losing steam, to give yourself the space to yell, scream, shout, punch something, like get your emotions out, um, but to think about how to move forward even when it seems like it's impossible. Um, and I would say just lean on God a lot. I think throughout this entire process, I've come to see how God has refined me in ways I didn't expect or didn't know. Um, I think it's easy to get angry at Him, but at the end of the day, it's really about understanding where He wants you to be, how He's refining you, praying that He refines you in a way that He sees fit, while meanwhile having the diligence to keep moving forward when it becomes tough. Um, and so I think that's my biggest piece of encouragement, um, that just keep going. Even when you feel like you've got everything you've wasted everything in the tank. Like, things do bear fruit and work for your good, even if you've been getting rejections time and time again. Those are just learning points for you to continue to get better. And I think with that mindset, things will come, and they will come in ways that is totally unexpected in left field. And hindsight's always 2020. It's always easy to look back, but when things are unclear, that's when your faith is refined and where God's grace is sufficient.
Amen. I couldn't have said it better myself. Larry, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here to share more of your story. I know that it's going to be encouraging for the people listening. It's encouraging for me. I might have to listen back because you've got good word to share, Larry. So thank you for sharing it today. And I think that's all that I got for you.
Sweet. Well, thank you for having me on your podcast.
Oh, of course. Thanks for being here. Bye, Larry.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. To get an even more meaningful head start into your calling, head to thecalledcareer.com, where my fellow career coach Audrey and I have created a whole suite of free resources and tools to help you get clear and get a job today. For those who are definitely ready to land a job or start a business in the next 6 to 12 months, we're here to help you biblically and practically discern your calling through coaching, reflection, and deep market research. Identify the job that's aligned with it, even if you currently have no idea what you want. Rebrand your resume and LinkedIn to translate your background to appeal to your future boss. P.S. We take this off your plate and do this for you. Also, we'll teach you how to land referrals and get attention from leadership through networking. Again, if that makes you nervous, we have these emails and LinkedIn messages literally written for you so you don't have to sweat. We're also here to give you unlimited interview practice so you're prepared to address every elephant in the room and knock selling yourself out of the park. Then we'll round out with helping you negotiate your salary so you land thousands more. Just so you know, recent clients have gotten $8,000 to $50,000 salary increases, even though they were totally non-traditional candidates. That's because we specialize in helping non-traditional career pivoters land jobs they're ecstatic to serve in. It takes work, but we're here to see you through until the end, when we're celebrating that day that you send me an email in all caps and you say, "Kelsey, I got the job." Then you could be on the podcast. But I'll be here until then, keeping you accountable and encouraged by meeting with you literally until you land the job you want, even if that's up to 6 months from now within our program. Apply to join at thecalledcareer.com, and I'll see you next week here at Answer the Call. Bye for now.